Today, I'm going to show you how to take a seeded farmhouse recipe that's been leavened with yeast and then completely flip it on its head, transforming it into a naturally fermented sourdough recipe, enhancing that flavour profile, improving digestibility, increasing the nutritional value, and giving us creative freedom. Now, for many, this is the very first step into the world of recipe development. And trust me, once you've discovered this new landscape, it's impossible to go back. I'm going to take a walk with you as we explore the process so that you can follow along at home. And then at the end, you're going to have a recipe to jump into the kitchen with and test bake. Right, so here's our test subject, a simple farmhouse seeded loaf. It's been leavened, as I said, with commercial yeast. Now we start by writing down that yeasted recipe. You can write the ingredients down in any order you like, but just make sure that you put the flour right at the top. Now the total weight of the flour in any recipe is always considered 100%. So as in this case, when our recipe uses more than one type of flour, we need to work out what the total weight of flour is first. And in this case, it's 500 grams. Next, we're going to quickly work out the baker's percentages. Now, if this is completely new to you, don't worry. I'm going to link to a video for you above and in the description. Now, we're going to use the same formula to reverse engineer the baker's percentage for each ingredient. And this is it. The individual ingredient weight is divided by the total flour weight, and then it's multiplied by 100. Right, so let me show you the first one. We've got 420 grams of strong bread flour. That's divided by the total flour weight, which is 500, and then it's multiplied by 100, which gives us 84%. Now we just work our way down the list of ingredients using the same formula to calculate each percentage. And that's it. We've now cloned the original recipe. Now from here, we can resize the dough to fit our baking tin or our proving basket properly. We can turn this into the simple sourdough recipe formula using a leaven. We can convert it into a hybrid formula using sourdough and yeasted Polish, or we can tweak the ingredients. Trust me, the possibilities for this are now endless. But as I said, today we're going to flip this into a simple sourdough recipe. Right, so now I want you to focus on the dough weight for a second. Now, as a beginner baker, you're going to find it infinitely easier to judge the proving stage if your dough is sized correctly for the tin or basket. Because if that dough's too big for your basket, there's a high chance it's going to underprove because there simply won't be enough room for the dough to kind of expand and prove sufficiently in that basket. Now, if your dough's way too small for the basket and then you try to kind of leave it to prove right up to the lip, then you're going to run the danger of overproving the dough. Now, once you get a bit of experience, that dough weight isn't quite as crucial, but right in the beginning, it can have this nasty habit of tripping you up. Now, as you can see, this dough weighs 961 grams, and my baskets, these ones here, they hold 800 grams of dough. So this dough is going to be way too big for this basket. So we'll get rid of that first column, and I'm going to write down my target dough weight at the top, and then I'm going to add together all of those baker's percentages. Now we can work out the weights we need for the recipe. We take the dough weight, we divide it by the total ingredient percentage, and then we multiply it by the individual ingredient percentage. So we'll run through the strong white flour. We take the target dough weight of 800 grams. We divide it by the total percentage, which is 191. We then multiply it by the strong white flour percentage, which is 84. And that gives us 352 grams. Now we work our way down that list, doing the same for each ingredient. And then when we total them up, we end up with our target dough weight. Right, so now we can work out the amount of leaven that we're going to use to kickstart that fermentation in our main dough. Now I want you to remember this. There's no straight conversion from baker's yeast into sourdough. The amount of leaven is going to vary depending on your schedule and of course the temperature in your kitchen and the ingredients you're using. Now I'm going to be fermenting at 25 degrees Celsius, so I'm going to use my standard 20% of leaven. Now to calculate that, I take that total flour weight and then I multiply it by 20%, and that gives me the weight of leaven. Right, we're going to mix this up a little bit just to make it a touch more interesting and give your brain a bit of a workout. For this leaven formula, we're going to use 75% of strong white bread flour, and then we're going to use 25% of whole wheat flour. Remember, that flour always needs to total 100%. we're going to use 100% of water to give us a nice even split with that flour. Now, whenever I make sourdough, I leave my leaven out overnight to ferment so that it's ready to go first thing in the morning. So I'm going to use just 10% of starter to inoculate the leaven. Now I use exactly the same formula. I take the leaven weight and then I divide it by the leaven's total percentage, and then I multiply it by the strong white flour percentage. And again, we work our way down the list of ingredients using exactly the same formula to calculate the other weights. And that's our leaven done and dusted. Right, so now we can do exactly the same for our starter. We take that starter weight that we calculated from the leaven, we divide it by the total starter percentage, and then we multiply it by the ingredient percentage. Now, you might be tempted to skip this step, but calculating the starter formula is important. For this specific recipe, the difference is negligible. But if you use larger inoculations or you push the hydration boundaries of your flour, you're going to want to get this right. It only takes 2 minutes, and if you really want to crack these sourdough formulas properly, this is a good habit to get into. Right, so our last step is to carry over the weights from the total formula and subtract the weight of any ingredients that were used in the starter or the leaven. So, for the strong white flour, we take the 352 grams, we minus the 30 grams for the leaven and the 2 grams for the starter. That leaves us with 320 grams for the main dough. We do exactly the same for the whole wheat flour and the water, and then we carry over the weights for the salt and the seeds, and of course we add in our leaven weight. And this is the recipe that I'm about to show you for the test bake. Now, if you're serious about recipe design and testing, you really should learn how to do this process by hand. You know, we use advanced calculators for working out super complex formulas in Sourdough Unchained, but I promise you, understanding the fundamentals of the process, you know, how all of this glues together, is going to give you a rock solid foundation. If you want to have a play around with our basic calculator, I will leave a link for you below in the description. And if you grab a copy, you'll also get notified when Magnus 5, our pro version, is released. Now, obviously, we can't use that same baking process from the yeasted recipe. So, how do we kind of make all of this work? Well, that process is going to change depending on the recipe. But for something simple like this formula, I just like to mirror my standard sourdough process. So, for this test bake, I mix my leaven up at 9 o'clock in the evening. The next morning, around 8 o'clock, I mixed up all of the other ingredients, including the seeds, to form the dough. After 30 minutes, the dough got a quick 2-minute bench mix. That was then followed by 2 laminations. Now, that first lamination was an hour and a half after the initial mix, and the second lamination was 2.5 hours after the initial mix. The dough was then left to complete a bulk fermentation. That was a total of 6.5 hours. It was then shaped and placed in the banneton. After a 2-hour ambient proof, I popped it in the fridge. The next morning, after a quick score, that dough baked on a stone that was preheated to 220 degrees Celsius. It baked for 20 minutes covered and then 25 minutes uncovered. Look, give this process a whirl at home. Use this method that I've shown you. Convert that original recipe into a sourdough formula that's actually dialed in to your proving basket. And just remember this, it's really rare that things kind of go right on that first test bake. So be prepared to tweak the percentages using that process I've shown you. Dial it in to suit you. Embrace the journey. Let each mistake be a lesson and then just take them forward into the next bake. Stay tuned. I'll see you in the next one.